2024 has probably been one of the best years of all time for boxing because we've had some incredible wars like Lomachenko versus Kambosos Jr., Ryan Garcia versus Devin Haney, Canelo Alvarez versus Jaime Munguia, and most recently Terence Crawford versus Israel Madrimov. In a year filled with big names finally fighting each other, Terence "Bud" Crawford is proving himself to be one of boxing's biggest stars. Now these fights are possible because of the Saudis putting up massive amounts of money to make the fights happen in Saudi Arabia. By having these fights happen in Saudi Arabia, the country is able to increase its cultural significance. I see nothing wrong with this because it's caused negotiations for fights to speed up rapidly, and we finally get to see these world champions go up against each other whilst they're still in their primes. Crawford has now become a full-weight world champion after taking the WBA light middleweight title from Israel Madrimov. And you may be wondering the same thing I was wondering. How was this guy able to dominate and succeed at such a high level? This guy's been a world champion for the past 10 years and has knocked out his last 11 opponents in world title fights before Madrimov. He's only been in hard fights for the majority of his career and has managed to stack up an impressive 41-0 record. So what's causing him to be so successful at the highest level of boxing? In order to answer this question, first we'll need to take a look at where it all started for Terence "Bud" Crawford. To say that Bud had a difficult childhood is an understatement. When he was a young child, his mother used to pay kids around the neighborhood to try and beat him up. He soon developed an angry mentality to prove his mother wrong, and he would carry that with him into adulthood. Now, a lot of people are quick to say that this tough parenting led to Crawford becoming who he is, but this is straight up child abuse. Crawford would start boxing at 7 years old and finished his amateur career with 58 wins and 12 losses. He won multiple national titles, but after losing at the 2008 Olympic trials, he would turn over and become a professional. He quickly put together a record of 19-0 with 15 knockouts against relatively unknown opposition before getting his first shot at a world title against Ricky Burns. Now Ricky Burns is one of Scotland's most decorated world champions, having won multiple world titles in 2 weight classes, and most people expected him to get an easy victory against this unknown fighter from America. Crawford surprised everyone and put a clinic on Burns, walking away with the WBO lightweight title. Bud would then go on to defend this title against undefeated fighter Yuriorkis Gamboa. At the time, Gamboa was one of the best boxers on the planet, having won multiple world titles and also ending his amateur career with an Olympic gold medal. The fight started out hard for Crawford as he had trouble dealing with Gamboa's hand speed and footwork, but as the fight progressed into the later rounds, Crawford started landing combinations and would knock Gamboa out in the 9th round. Bud would defend this title once before moving up to his second weight class and winning the vacant WBO light welterweight title against Thomas Delorme. He easily knocked Delorme out in the 6th round and defended this title another 2 times before fighting the WBC champion Victor Postol in a unification bout. Postol was coming into this with a great win over Lucas Matisse, so many people believed that this fight would be close. Crawford, however, was on a mission to prove these people wrong. He came in and constantly kept moving, which made it difficult for Postol to get anything off because he prefers to plant his feet and shoot. Postol became more frustrated and Crawford was able to catch him off balance, knocking him down twice. Bud would defend this title a few times before eventually fighting the other champion in the weight class with 2 belts, Julius Indongo. Now people didn't know much about Indongo because he came onto the scene and managed to gain 2 belts without any sort of build-up. Indongo has the power to turn off anyone's lights, but Crawford demonstrated great defense to avoid this and started targeting Indongo's thin torso with body shots. He managed to catch Indongo to the body in the 3rd round and Indongo couldn't get up. After becoming undisputed at light welterweight, he vacated the titles and moved up to welterweight to face Jeff Horn for his WBO belt. Jeff Horn was coming off a controversial win against Manny Pacquiao in a fight which many people believed Manny was robbed in, so people were really rooting for Bud to get revenge for Manny. Horn is a very aggressive fighter who looks to make the fight rough, but Bud was able to put a clinic on him and hurt him many times before eventually stopping him in the 9th round. For the next 4 years, Bud would defend his title against the likes of Jose Benavidez Jr., Amir Khan, Egadius Kavalauskas, Kell Brook, Sean Porter and David Avanesian, stopping them all. During these 4 years, boxing fans were praying for a fight between Terence Crawford and Errol Spence Jr. and in 2023, we finally got it. People were expecting this fight to have been close, but Bud had great timing on his counters and his jab was brilliant for opening up Spence. Spence was trying to make it an inside fight, but even then, Bud looked comfortable covering up on the inside and working with Spence. He hurt Spence multiple times before the referee finally waved it off in the 9th round. Now this brings us to his latest fight against Israel Madrimov. I wasn't expecting this fight to be this close, but Madrimov gave Crawford his hardest fight. I know some people were saying Madrimov won, but it wasn't that close. Crawford was getting the better of the exchanges, spending the first half of the fight on the outside catching Madrimov with his jab before pressuring Madrimov in the second half. Madrimov did have his moments of success, and I was really impressed with his conditioning because he was able to maintain his highly mobile style, and I think they should move him up to middleweight because he could easily secure another belt in the second weight class. We've talked about his long and successful resume, but if we want to see why he's so dominant, I think we need to take a closer look at his style. The first thing to mention about Crawford is that he's 5'8" or 173 centimeters tall with a 74-inch reach or 188 centimeter reach. This is an incredible 15 centimeter difference between his height and reach, which leaves him with incredibly long arms, an asset which has led Crawford to having one of the best jabs in boxing right now. He's also a switch hitter, which means he's able to switch between both the orthodox and southpaw stances. Now, a lot of boxers actually switch hit, but they usually have one side that they're significantly better in, but this isn't the case with Crawford. I think he could have become a world champion with just his orthodox or southpaw stance alone. This also changes the dynamic of his jab, because when he's in his natural orthodox stance, it's a great rangefinder and sets up his combination, and when he switches to southpaw, it becomes stiff and strong, almost like being hit by a backhand. We saw how powerful this stiff jab was against Kell Brook when he switched to southpaw and forced Brook to quit from his jab. This level of proficiency makes it so that when someone adapts to Crawford, he can completely change the game by switching stance. Another one of his strongest attributes is his counterpunching. He has some of the sharpest counterpunching and is capable of doing this from both stances. Regardless of how good your defense is, you're going to have openings, and Crawford takes his time to figure out which counters work well for you. For example, in his fight against Sean Porter, Porter was lunging in a lot and he was defensively responsible for most of the fight, but Bud started to find a home for his uppercut, and in the 10th round, he was able to put Porter down with an uppercut as Porter lunged in and ducked down. To top it all off, he has a very versatile guard which stays loose on the outside and becomes a tight high guard on the inside. He's also able to use his shoulder roll and combines this with head movement to have excellent defense. Such a large toolkit makes him a nightmare for anyone to deal with. That being said, he does have a few noticeable weaknesses. One weakness is he can sometimes lose alertness and get caught by odd shots. We saw this in his fight with Gamboa, where he started getting lazy with his defense and Gamboa managed to rock him. Another weakness is his size. He's fighting well above his natural weight class, which means he's only going to be facing naturally bigger fighters now. His most recent fight with Israel Madrimov for the WBA Super Welterweight World title was hands down his hardest fight of his career. I'll be honest, I was expecting this fight to have been a pretty easy fight for Crawford, because after looking at Madrimov, he just seemed like a budget Sean Porter in the way he leaps in and swings, but he definitely proved me wrong. I thought he would get tired from having to maintain such a high pace, but his conditioning was incredible and he was able to stay sharp and active throughout the whole fight. He's also got some switch hitting because he was able to change stance at different moments to give Crawford more to think about, and he's also got incredible head movement and slips. That being said, I still don't think this fight was as close as people are making it seem. The first few rounds, Crawford was fighting mostly out of the southpaw stance, catching Madrimov with his piston-like jab. He spent the next few rounds keeping a gap between him and Madrimov with his lead hand control and excellent footwork. I do think Madrimov was starting to get more comfortable through rounds 4 to 6 as he was more willing to engage, but Crawford was still successful in a lot of these exchanges with his counterpunch. In the later rounds, Crawford started landing great body shots as headshots were too difficult to land on Madrimov with his constant movement. Madrimov was starting to have success by pot shotting with his right because it was hard for Crawford to see the lead right hand coming, but they were just a few moments of success. Crawford finished the fight by trying to use his high guard to pressure Madrimov and had some great flurries of combinations to finish the fight. I think Crawford is going to have a much harder time at the higher weight classes, which is what makes the Canelo fight so interesting to me. The super welterweight class has a lot of talented fighters such as Jamal Charlo, Sebastian Fundora, Virgil Ortiz Jr. and Tim Tszyu. The dream fight for me would be Crawford versus Canelo, but it's looking like Canelo wants the biggest bag of all time, so I don't think this fight is getting made anytime soon. If Crawford is able to clear out the super welterweight division, I think he has a strong case for GOAT status. This may be possible for him to accomplish within the next year or two, because it's looking like the Saudis are willing to back him up in getting these fights because they want to be involved in making history. Let me know what you guys think of Crawford and who do you guys want me to talk about next. Comment below, and if you want to see more content like this, then don't forget to like and subscribe.